Start the meeting. Okay, do we want to throw the agenda on the screen, or does everyone at least have a copy of the agenda?
Good.
Perfect. So step one, call to order. Okay, in order. Step two, acceptance of minutes from last month's meeting. Did anyone that had a chance to look at them have any feedback or comments? Yes.
I have a change on the capital budget requests from the committee. Surprise, surprise, on the public transportation feasibility study. This third bullet, about half of the city council spoke in support of the proposal. The council voted to list the parking garage study and to fund in 2027 with general funds or other revenue. So instead of half spoken support, I mean, that half supported, it's half spoken support, and the whole council voted to support it.
Okay. Are you by any chance noting that down, Kate, or do you want to just? Perfect.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks, folks.
Any other feedback, anyone? All right, awesome. And do we have quorum?
Yeah.
Okay. So anyone,
I move that we accept the minutes as with the noted changes.
all in favor?
Second.
Second, sorry. All in favor?
All right.
Perfect. Anyone opposed? Did I hear any no's? Okay, awesome. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next item, which is regarding the committee administration. So we are at the point in the year where it's time to elect either a new chair or co-chairs. One of them of last year being up to my right, so I don't know if there's a preferred way to go about this.
Yeah, well, so I don't know, Jess, you want to sort of talk about? I know Effie said she's not interested in elected. I don't know if you want to kind of talk about your thoughts, if you'd like to be nominated again.
Um, Short answer to that is no. I really enjoyed the opportunity and I value the work here on the committee. And because of that, I think that it would be helpful to have a new perspective and some other people kind of lead the effort a little bit. So I know Effie and I had tried to reach out to some people who have been on the committee for a little while and see if they were interested, and there was sort of a mixed response. So at this point, I would say anybody who's interested in doing it and taking the role, please feel free to throw your name in the hat.
Bill and I have been discussing being co-chairs.
Yeah.
That's one option.
What information do you two feel that you need to be firm in your decision, one way or another?
The only thing I would need is the support of the committee.
Same for me and for Fred to agree to be a co-chair. Was a key. Is a key item.
Can you say I have the utmost admiration and love for these two gentlemen. And one of the things that I'm aware of is for those who didn't know, we went from a blue ribbon committee to a standing committee, which now makes us officially part of government. And I don't know of any other committee that has co-chairs. I don't know of any in the city. I think that your check-in question, the way we're rotating chairpersonship, we are establishing what I think is a inspirational model of how to have as much as possible, a non-hierarchical structure. And a co-chair, I think, is really good. And we do only meet once a month. And I think particularly with everybody's increased pressure on time and ability to be places, a co-chair is great. And I do think that both Bill and Fred have tremendous skills to bring. And I would be happy if they were able to do it for a year. And so I would support that. Unless somebody else wanted to throw their hat in the mix. And Colleen, are you there?
I'm here.
Colleen, the other thing I had talked about, because I've been thinking about it, at some point when I was talking to Bill in an earlier conversation for all transparency, what we want to do, since the most precious thing that anybody has is their time. And given the urgency of so many issues, I think each of us has more opportunities almost every day to do something that we don't get to do. So the question that I always come down to is, I think somebody said, what do we feel passionate about and where can we get the best leverage? So in some ways, I think, if not this year, Colleen, and I'm thinking Kiana, Bill has 40 years of experience in government, systems thinking, making things work on a practical level. Brett has tremendous knowledge of technology, communication, and so forth. So I would say that both of you might be considering, either now or in the future, being newer people on the committee, that you could get that, I think, intergenerational combinations are important for perspective. So I just throw that into the mix, and I don't know how either of you feel about that, but that's what I think.
It's a great sign of support for Fred and Bill.
There.
It's a thumbs up from Colleen.
Me too. Okay, so on that note, it sounds like we have some support. I'll second what was just shared. I also would support the both of you being co-chairs. But to your earlier point, is there anyone else who is interested in that position? Okay. So do we make a motion to elect the
I
two
will
of
make a
you?
motion to nominate Bill Lyons and Fred Calcinari as co-chairs to the Sustainability Committee.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, congratulations.
Have a victory party or anything?
Okay, awesome. So we'll move on to the next item then, if there's no other comments on item 3. Okay, so we have community engagement. This is, I think, something that we have on just as a placeholder for every meeting to check in on these 4 topics. The first one being Portsmouth climate action. Anyone have an update on Portsmouth climate action?
Yeah, I can pass something on from our meeting last night. And
Okay.
that was Fred, Bert, and me. We've been talking to John Robinson, who's been to some of these meetings on Portsmouth climate action. And he's been doing some very good work reaching out to an academic named Dr. Shukla. And Dr. Shukla, Jagadish Shukla, and he is a very, very illustrious academic and researcher on climate forecasting. And John is working to see if he might come and give a community climate conversation, hopefully coordinated with the Sustainability Fair. And Dr. Shukla grew up in a small village in India and then went ahead and took an unlikely path to MIT and Princeton and the highest echelons of climate science. His work has enabled us to predict weather further into the future than previously thought possible. And he was on the climate team that won the Nobel Prize with Al Gore for his governmental research on climate change, and has a a book called A Billion Butterflies, talking about his work. And I think the idea is that he would come talk about his work and the state of climate change science and research. I guess John's thinking is that it would be at the library, and coordinating with Jess, hopefully to make that maybe an earlier part or a lead-in on April 10th to that. And so John is talking to Jess and talking to the library, and I think we'll just keep everybody informed as that plays out. I think from this committee, once this firms up, maybe the committee could help us with some outreach. According to John, Dr. Shukla is particularly interested in students and younger folks, and we've been challenged to get a diverse audience in for the community climate conversations. We've had probably 6 or 7 of those over the last 2 years. So I think, Sully, we'd appreciate your help probably once this thing gets going, to see maybe connecting through the Echo Club and others, and the school board representative and all, to see if we can get a good robust young audience. And I guess if it works out, it would be a nice setup for the sustainability fair, because people could then walk across the library parking lot into the Connie Bean Center. So that's an update on that. Bert or Fred,
Sorry.
you want to add anything to
Okay, I
that?
just have a clarifying question.
Yeah.
You say younger audience. I mean, so my younger audience, I have a 2.5-year-old. Like, what are we thinking? Like,
Middle school to high school.
middle school,
I'd
high
say.
school.
That's my guess.
And I think John has also talked about reaching out to some of the UNH sustainability students,
Great.
because this is such a valuable speaker.
Could we fill the music hall?
If we suggest that to John, he'll be right on top of it, but I don't know.
I think he's asked already, actually. I think he had reached out to the music hall and thought maybe it could be sort of like a writers on the New England stage type thing. But they do their planning and booking
Way ahead.
way
Okay.
ahead, so they have kind of respectfully said no, thank you this time. So, but yeah, that was discussed as a larger venue. He sounds like he could bring quite a crowd if the word gets out, so.
And I just wanted to confirm, it's April 12th is the fair. 10th, all right. So I want to make sure, April 10th is, so we got lots of time to plan. So you want to put that date down, is the fair, and what are the times for the fair?
4:30 to 7, it's a Friday,
April 10th, 4:30 to
7.
7. And there's some complexity coming in because the library closes at 5 on Friday. And so we don't want to draw away from the fair, but so all of those things are in negotiation. But what I think is most satisfying, since you got me on the idea of inspiration, I'm inspired how there are connections that started that John Robbins went like you to one of the community conversations, and how he came around, and now he's working to get this in. So it's really individuals doing individual things that make a difference. And there's a lot to be done, but we're doing a lot. So
And on these community conversations, it's been a collaboration between the citizens groups, grassroots groups, Seacoast Climate Action Now, and Portsmouth Climate Action, which works closely with the Sustainability Committee to organize public outreach meetings, particularly around climate change. And they've been at the library in the Levinson Room and done in partnership with the library. So we're hoping we can set the same thing up.
Or the high school? The high school has a large auditorium space.
Yeah. I mean, that might be a possibility. One of the tricky things is to get enough people to fill the Levinson Room. And I think our numbers have sort of fluctuated a bit. I think it's 120 folks for that, but
the high school auditorium is how much?
I don't know.
I'd say it's about 600. That's what I was going to guess.
Okay, we'll definitely keep us in the loop on his schedule if anything firms up, and if you need anything from this committee to support. All right, I'm gonna move on to the next sub bullet, which is a Bright Action update. So I last month or the month prior, there was an update that the funding for that is ending in the next month or two. So potentially the bullet is here because we have renewal options and resources. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, you kind of covered it, but so our invoice is due at the end of January. I'm sure we could extend it a little bit with Lisa, founder of Bright Action. But we don't have any department funds set aside for this, and we're kind of pretty limited on what we can spend funds on this year with the budget being so tight. So we don't have city funding for Bright Action. I know we briefly mentioned if CCAN has anything or Portsmouth Climate Action to continue it. But if not, then I think we'll just let it lapse for a year and maybe revisit it in a year when the budget comes back.
So how do we request of Portsmouth Climate Action or CCAN if they could support this?
I don't know.
Portsmouth Climate Action doesn't have any money, but CCAN does have money, but not much. So, you know, the total budget, total assets right now are about $3,000. So
Okay, so this would empty, this is 2,200, yeah.
could be a big stretch.
So, yeah,
Does anybody have an update on how many people have signed up at this point?
Last I checked, last month it was 104.
Okay, so we got over the 100.
Yeah.
And the 104 do not need to pay to sign up, correct? So is there a model in which individuals could pay to
it's a good question.
continue
Sure.
using it?
There's nothing built into the app to make that happen, but we could figure out some way to, charge people.
Okay, and you need an answer on this by the end of the month, right?
Yeah, I think there's no way for us to continue funding for the next year, but it would be good if I can look into, you just brought up, is some individual, pricing, or if they can even join like the main Bright Action page and try to get their membership still going.
Just to have a little dialogue on this. If 100 people gave $25 each, we'd have the money, right? And I remember when I was looking at organizing, and they used to say, Noam Chomsky, he would charge people in the ghetto, and they said, "We don't have any money," and he said, "Well, if you want my services, you got to pay," and they paid, and then he actually got things done. So what I learned from that, and I don't think this always works, people kind of value what they pay for more than what they get for free.
Right.
And it might be an interesting feedback for Lisa and for us. And I'm looking at you, Fred, about the technology. If we had all the names and just were very transparent about what the history is, where we're at, and we'd like to have another year, how many people would be willing to donate between 10 and $50 so that we could then have another year's trial? Even if we didn't get the money, it would be, I don't know how difficult and whether that's worth the energy rather than let it lapse for a year. Because we do have a lot of people put some time in, and I know you asked me for $25, I signed up, but I don't use it. So I might go back in and start to use it more. So I just throw that out and have any thoughts on that.
It's a good point. Like you say, people value what they pay for. But there is no way in the app of doing that. We could potentially leverage the Seacoast Can website to collect money, sort of by using the Bright Action member list. So it's just, it could be done. Just a question of how people would react to that if we said, you have to, and we couldn't necessarily enforce, if they didn't pay, we couldn't bar them from using it. But it would just be interesting to say, if you think this is a valuable thing to have in our community, are you willing to basically donate some money to keep it alive?
Yeah, I would say It would be a very open, transparent letter. Give it the history, where it is and where it's gonna go. And how many people would be willing to put something in, and we would get back to you if anything, numbers seem right. We'll send out and we can send it in. And then at that point, I think Lisa, even if we got $1,100, she might say, I'd rather have you guys on board with $1,100 for the year than let it lapse. So I don't think it's about the money as much as I'm looking how, and would anybody enjoy doing it? And would that be a useful educational piece? Everything that I think we do should be both functional and educational. So, and I'm just aware that I would put, when I said, yeah, I put 25 in, then I thought maybe somebody else would. How many people here are on Bright Action? All right, let's just see, honest thing. If you got it, let's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Realistically, you get a letter, we give you the history, say we want to do another year pilot, and we're going to ask for people to put a donation in, $25 more or less, or just you would like it to happen. What would be your response? And you have a response? Truth will make you free.
Yeah,
There's no right or wrong.
I think it's a great platform. I just don't see people using it actively every day. So I don't know if that would trigger like a financial.
I'm saying you personally, if I asked you to put in 25, would you do it for the next year? And no, good. What would you say, Bill?
I would.
You would. Who else was in? Are you in?
No, I was gonna ask what it is.
Okay, that's
You can
good.
sign up for 25.
Tyler?
No, I think the city's financial incentives work better.
Fred?
Yes.
So we got 3 people who, and Fred, you could probably explain what Bright Action is, maybe in a little summary. If you would.
It's a tool for managing your carbon footprint, your personal carbon footprint. So it has numerous different actions you could take, suggested actions you could take. So first of all, it gives you a brief questionnaire to kind of figure out where you're at in terms of your carbon footprint. It gives you a bunch of different actions you can take that could lower your footprint. And as you take those actions, it'll show you how your estimated carbon output is changing over time. And then you get badges if you do certain actions, things like that. And then you can see the cumulative impact of all the people who are members across the city. So it's a kind of a way to gauge, how the community efforts more broadly are affecting the local, carbon output.
May I ask, Fred, did they ever get the app for the phone?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, they do have it.
Yes.
Okay,
It's really it's very, very, very phone centric now.
okay,
It still works on a browser, but it's more really geared toward a phone.
okay.
And we've often talked about how this has a great potential that we haven't yet tapped into, particularly for aligning it with the city's climate action plan, because it's the same categories. It's just a way of translating it to not only individuals, but households, schools, businesses, and to move forward on meeting the targets in the plan.
So I think what I'm hearing is that if we don't have $2,500 by the end of this month, everyone is gonna be locked out of Bright Action.
Oh, so one comment on that is that the last time we lapsed our annual fee, Lisa didn't shut us off.
Okay,
Because, as Bert said, she's more interested in us using it than in making money from it. So she's very lenient about not meeting that. At least she always has been in the past.
It seems like it's gonna be this time, or at least. So we have a little bit more time to maybe do a fundraising thing or.
okay.
So
Can I jump in?
Yep.
So 2 pieces. Number 1, if the pilot was done and the result was that people aren't using it, then I think like that is what we learned from the pilot, right? Like doing more wouldn't necessarily change, having it around for longer wouldn't necessarily change anything unless we, along with the money committed to some sort of significant time and labor investment on our end for getting people to do it. And I haven't seen that happen. So I'm skeptical that like doing more, extending any sort of contract would get us the results that we're looking for. And the other piece being, I like the idea of letting people decide if they want to keep Bright Action, but I worry about where it positions us and where it positions sustainability as something that is asking and not necessarily giving. And we don't do a lot as a committee in the public eye necessarily. We're still very much like, okay, we're doing the budget requests, we are advising on things. So every time we kind of venture out of that and we're interacting with the community and we're interacting with the public, I would want us to use that goodwill strategically and not necessarily be asking. So those are my 2 cents. Do whatever you want.
Okay, those are valid points. I guess are you comfortable reaching out to people asking? Maybe here's what we do as a middle ground. Before we reach out to anyone, we draft what that message would be and then get some buy-in on it. I don't know if we can circulate that quickly via email, but perhaps the messaging here is very important.
And I agree with Colleen that just keeping it alive is not sufficient. Keeping it alive and promoting it actively would make more sense. And we haven't been able to generate the manpower or the people power to do that promotional effort. You know, Lisa suggests things like, you know, going door to door, knocking on people's doors and saying, you want to sign up for Bright Action. And also involves going to community groups, talking to people and getting them, you know, fired up about it, that sort of thing. So it's, if we don't do both, I agree with Colleen, if you just get the money, but we don't commit to the promotional part of it, then we shouldn't continue to pursue it.
Question. What Colleen mentioned, you know, the goals. What is the goal of this app, or what is the goal of? Because I'm looking through it now and it's all great stuff, but like what's?
Yeah, the goal was to use it as a way of educating people about what they can do personally to help, you know, reduce their climate, because, you know, as you know, the city's goal with the climate action plan is to reduce or to have net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And we can't do that without community members, you know, people and businesses doing their part. So we saw this as potentially a way that we could, you know, people would see this and say, well, what can I do? Well, here's what I can do. And there's all these different things I can do. And it tells you what the impact would be, things like that. So that was the kind of idealistic concept. And when we officially forked over the money to make this happen, and the money came from Seacoast Can initially, and then the city, you know, paid for another year. So ideally at this point, we'd have, you know, a couple thousand households with Bright Action, everybody, you know, recycling their plastics and driving electric cars and riding bicycles and stuff like that. That hasn't happened. So there must be some other way to make that happen.
It's always seemed like one of the best tools we've come across
It looks like a great tool.
for lowering the city's emissions and implementing the plan. I mean, the plan is really no more than a combination of different strategies, and those are the same strategies that are in Bright Action. But I think that Fred is right that it really comes down to us having the time and the energy. And Fred, you've done some demonstrations and some outreach. I mean, it just seems like that.
Church groups and what do you call it, the Rotary Club.
Yeah, and that the best bet is doing more of those, but we just have to have committee members that are able to put the time into doing that. Like, for example, working with the Echo Club, for example, to get Portsmouth High students to try it out. Or I think you talked to at least one church group, I think South Church, doing more of that, but then I think we just need some of us
In
to.
both cases, there wasn't a big uptake. It wasn't, so.
Yeah.
Maybe.
We did a community climate conversation that
Yeah.
Kate led, and it
Mhm.
was a great community conversation, but we just, despite best efforts, didn't have a lot of people in the room.
Would Chamber of Commerce be
Definitely.
like willing to connect, good to, because I love all of these things and but I always think that like I feel like individuals do a lot, and then when you take it up to businesses and then when you take it up to corporations,
Yeah.
that's where,
I think the model includes competitions between builders.
and then I was gonna ask to gamify, or if we could ask for donations from local businesses to actually like put a little bit of, meat in the game or something to really entice people, like what's it for?
It almost would take a year's worth of success in having them involved in using it than to support it. So it's almost like it needs some more initiation.
You mentioned Eco Club with high school, and do you just, if anybody knows what's going on with that right now? Oh, we've got someone here. I'm sorry, I'm not usually here, so.
Emmy is not here today. She's really the Eco Club rep. So I know they're doing their own spring market. I'm not exactly sure when that is, but I'm pretty sure they are not aware of this.
Yeah, we tried to engage with the club faculty guidance person. And we never got to that success in actually getting in there and doing a demo.
Bert has been patiently waiting to make a comment.
I'd like to say, Colleen's 2 cents were like 2 gold weights for me because they were really valuable. Because I've had the same thoughts, but you articulated it very well, Colleen.
Thank you.
And I'm glad that you are somebody who looks at data, and a pilot is a pilot to give you information. So we got the information.
Okay, good. I didn't want to be a downer, but I was like,
No,
so I was
no,
nervous, but thank you.
it's not a downer. It actually brings me to something that I'll throw out. It'll take me 2 or 3 minutes, but I'm going to put it out. When I first was working with your carbon footprint, and I worked with it for around 20 years, I thought it was, boy, when they kept on putting online and students can get it. But then there was a friend who was working at MIT who came out and said, the ecological footprint is always going to be a downer. Because no matter what you do, you're always going to have something that you're not doing. So for the rest of your life, you can feel guilty about if you eat a hamburger rather than a plant-based diet, or if you do. So I thought that's an interesting perspective. So what's the alternative? And he came up with a handprint. Now, how many of you are familiar with a handprint? Well, it was in Time magazine as one of the 10 best ideas, 10 upcoming ideas. Greg Norris lives right up here in Maine. He's now down at MIT working full-time on sustainability. The handprint is not what you're not doing, it is what you are doing. An example that he would say was when he was up in Maine, he got his church group to go out with tire pressure monitors. And when people came to church, he went around and tested everybody's tires. And at the end of testing everybody's tires, they were able to inflate them, and they saved a lot of carbon just by people acting. And then I've been teaching a course for so many years, and I had one of my students become the sustainability director down at Exeter Academy. So you could say that even though I might keep my temperature up higher than some other people, my footprint is lower because I'm having a multiple effect. So your handprint has no end to how much good you can do. And that's why we want to look for our greatest leverage. And I used to give handprint parties and have people come together, and you can do everything from a restaurant that gives up single use. So maybe we want to I just saw Greg at a protest the other day. That's what I'm thinking of the handprint. So the handprint's still around. And if anybody wanted a presentation, we could do it here and look at that as a alternative to the, so I've always had mixed feeling. I don't know if does that make sense to anybody?
Yes, and I feel like there's maybe some mixed feelings from the rest of the group. So maybe what I'll suggest is we reach out to Lisa and understand what our grace period is. But I think between now and then, we need to come to some consensus on if this is worth pursuing as it exists. If it is, do we get the funding from the current users? Or do we turn this into a positive data collection versus a negative data collection? So
It's not even data collected. To get the handprint is to encourage people to look at their own system and then do what you can in your own system. So it's very encouraging anyway, so.
okay.
And Fred, we've contacted Lisa for ideas on expanding the usage as well. Did she have other ideas besides going door to door?
It's the two things I mentioned, going door to door and engaging community groups.
Yeah, the latter seems more promising.
Yeah, although my experience so far hasn't been all that
Yeah.
Rewarding. The other thing we can think about is just offering a different tool, one that's not, doesn't have to pay for. For example, the Drawdown website has many of the same things that Bright Action has. Doesn't have the membership and the gamifying and all that, but has tons of resources that people could use to figure out what to do with their lives. So I think that if we can't come up with a reasonable way to fund and support Bright Action, then I would suggest going with a free website like Drawdown.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'll just say that if we do decide to go the route of trying to fundraise, then the ownership then has to go back to someone that isn't City of Portsmouth, just because we can't support something that's asking, for donations. So it'd have to go back to PCA or CCAN, and I don't know if those groups would be willing to host it again. But I guess in the next month, do we just, I don't know if it's just worth making a vote now, just so we can get it out on the table now.
Let's vote for it now.
Yeah.
So what are we voting for?
Well, we can, I think, maybe ask members of PCA to go back to their next meeting and maybe pitch it to the rest of your group. Or if we're not interested, let's just cut it now and revisit in a year and pursue free alternatives in the meantime.
Again, I might want to throw out just a question that kind of came up as you were talking about the handprint alternative. I wonder how many people would be more interested in kind of that positive view versus I'm gonna go and investigate a carbon footprint and I'm gonna do that, but I'm already invested. Like I'm already doing a lot of things and I'm going to continue to try and do more, but I'm more of the minority than what everybody else is doing. So I kind of have that question of, I wonder how many people you are going to be able to reach with this tool that aren't already doing so many things.
One of the things this does is it will make some suggestions that may not have occurred to you, even if you are very committed. So you may be really putting your energy and finances into weatherproofing, but you may not realize that if you take one trip a week on the coast bus, you may accomplish as much as you did or less. I mean, it's just for someone with an interest, either very interested or somewhat interested, it'll move you along the spectrum.
Can I make a comment? I think education is always important. So, I think this platform is trying to educate people. It may be attracting the already converted to your point. So kind of doing, more outreach may have some incremental, effect. But in the tech industry, I always find that it's always useful to fail because there's lessons in failure as to why something didn't work. And it frees up opportunity costs for doing something that may be more successful going forward. And if I could add just one thing, just a kind of a carbon footprint story, it's an industrial sized one. Back when we had the oil crisis, the OPEC oil crisis, energy got to be really expensive. And it encouraged Alcoa Aluminum to change their smelting process for aluminum. Now, you may know that aluminum takes a lot of energy to smelt. And Alcoa always knew how to do smelting more efficiently, but energy was too cheap. So when the OPEC oil crisis took place, the economics of energy changed and Alcoa introduced the new process for smelting aluminum. Okay, and that's all nice. Smelting aluminum represented 1/3 of all electricity used in the United States, and they reduced it by over 25%. So that is a carbon footprint impact. So I'm wondering if, the folks who were very smart around the table have analogous stories that can be related.
Sure, I'll have you go, but first just want to give everyone a time check. This is an important conversation, so let's make sure we have it, but we have a full agenda to get through after this, but.
Two things. I'm going both ways. I'm saying I think most people who sign up already are on board, and I signed up and I haven't gone back in. So I am a test run, and that's why I said maybe I'd get back in. So that says, let's drop it. On the other hand, if I had to put $25, I might present it to the 55 retired people at Portsmouth, and 3 or 4 of them might pick it up. So I go both ways. In terms of your leverage, we had somebody on the committee who was talking about it was a bipartisan group that was trying to get a carbon tax. And that's a huge leverage because once a carbon tax goes in, that takes care of the whole shebang. If you can get that high level in. So we might want to think about, we send letters to the governor. And if we wanted to go back, it's still active. I don't think it's as bipartisan, but it has senators and people saying, do an initial carbon tax. And that would really lower everybody's carbon footprint. So that's a huge leverage point. Now, where do we as a voluntary committee have our greatest point?
One of the priorities, and I know we'll talk about committee priorities later in the agenda, is implementing the climate action plan. And it's a challenge. I mean, we will talk in a few minutes about the committee's recommendations for the capital investment plan. But that climate action plan has city activities that are really dwarfed by community activities. And there's not a lot of resources available to really reach out to the community and get individuals, households, schools, and businesses to take actions in parallel to what's in the climate action plan. And it's a full range of things. So I think there's a great potential in bright action. I think our challenge is whether folks on the committee are willing to maybe pick up the mantle that Fred had and tried and found to be a challenge to get people to do it. But I'm sure that Lisa has encountered that challenge in every one of the applications. And does she have some cities that are examples that have come up with thousands instead of hundreds?
She does.
Yeah.
But that may mean there's more motivated people in those cities. People have busy lives, they're busy, feeding their kids or, putting food on the table. And We asked them to take 10 minutes at a time to look at a website that's gonna suggest more things they can do to reduce their carbon footprint. And most people just don't bother, they don't bother. finding
Definitely a
way.
bigger reach to ask them to give it a try or send $25 in.
Mhm.
That's gonna be hard.
So I think something important Kate said earlier is that if we have the users pay for it, it's no longer supported by this committee because we cannot take volunteer money.
Contract just can't be with the city. It'll have to be with another group like PCA or CCN.
Which it was the first year.
So I think that answers the question for us if we don't have funding for it. So what I'm hearing as a next step would be, we need to understand if PCA is willing to support this, one, and then two, if they are willing to ask and support this, are either this committee or members of PCA willing to outreach and try and gain more interest?
So we can ask them and then report back at the next sustainability meeting.
And the committee members could participate as well in the outreach. I mean,
Mhm.
I think the issue is the ownership of the platform, but
So do we have anything we need to vote on? Otherwise, I think, is that an action that you can take, Fred, or somewhere else? Okay. Okay, did you get that, Jess?
is there a follow-up conversation with Lisa?
There it is, and my one big worry is just that if we come back in a month and PCA says, yes, let's start fundraising, that's another month and a half that we're pushing out on Lisa and making her keep the platform open when we aren't paying. So,
That's up to her,
yeah, it is, and yeah, they were lenient last year, but I don't think we should step on their toes too much longer. But I can definitely send her an email tomorrow saying, we decided we're gonna wait a month to really talk more about it. If she wants to put it on hold, then she can put it on hold, but if she doesn't, that'd be great.
Okay, I don't know if you got that, Jess, but Kate is gonna reach out to Lisa to understand the grace period for extending right action, no pay for users. And then Fred is gonna talk to the PCA group about if they would be willing to take ownership and ask the current users for their financial support.
That would be Seacoast Can / Portsmouth Climate Action.
Okay. If there are no final comments on this one, I'm gonna keep us moving. Okay, very quickly, we have the committee webpage and sustainability fair. Is there anything new for the committee webpage since last meeting?
I gave Kate the revised copy.
It's just been uploaded to the website, so that should be all set.
So complete.
Okay, and I'm now,
Is it-
sorry.
Is that our new webpage? Like if we go there, that's what it looks like now?
Right, yeah, our new webpage has the new wording that Fred put together about the purpose statement,
Fred and Colleen.
and Colleen too, yeah. Gotta get all the links. Yep.
Nice.
Thanks for doing that.
Thank you.
Colleen?
Does anyone not know when or where the sustainability fair is?
I think Jess should just say it again so she doesn't have to write anymore. And she can say a little bit about it.
Well, I'm gonna quiz you because I think you just put it in your notes a few minutes ago.
Well, I put it in that it's the 10th, and that it's gonna be from 4 to 7, but Jess knows that
4:30 to 7.
4:30 to 7, and I think it'd be good to say it's talk about pilot. It has been growing, and there's more aspects to it now than last year. Maybe you could talk about what the
Yes, so for any of you who don't know, this is our 4th annual sustainability committee, I believe. We started it a few years ago, the day before Earth Day, as an effort to bring awareness and educate citizens and residents and local community members about all the ways that they could get involved and take action on Earth Day. So when we started, we invited solely nonprofits in the region that are doing work to protect and take care of the planet in whatever capacity they do that. And it has grown And we also invited city entities and groups that were kind of working. So Sustainability Committee has come, the city's Conservation Commission has come. In that time, it's grown. We now invite businesses who are doing sustainable efforts so they can share to the public as well. We are really trying to make it a regional event, so people involved in Kittery Action and other local communities are always invited to come participate and share. Every year, we've grown in the number of attendees. So the first year we had 250. The second year, I think we had 500. And last year, we think we hit 1,000 people. We usually get about 30 different exhibitors who come. We try to make it interactive so that's interesting for people. So last year, we had the 65-foot whale from the Blue Ocean Society. I don't know if that's coming this year, but we will have a coast bus there that's coming. The city arborist always tries to give out the saplings at the event for the community members as part of the event. Hopefully this year we might have a speaker in conjunction with it. And so that's really the impetus, and the goal is to be a collaborative regional effort to educate so people feel engaged and that there is community around trying to take some action. So
Great fun.
and hopefully great fun, yes. And so, as stated, this one is April 10th, which is a Friday from 4:30 to 7. Historically, it's always at the Connie Bean. We partner with the library. Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm missing any other major details, but hopefully we actually have a budget this year. This is the first year we have some money, so we try to entice families by offering some sort of free food and refreshments and things. We've had donations in the past, so we're gonna see what that looks like this year. We have entertainment. We've had people play in the gym. We've had the leftist marching band out front playing. Yeah, so.
Awesome. Any questions for Jess on the sustainability fair? Okay.
Who to contact for if you wanted to be a vendor?
Me. Yeah. There's a small group of us who spearhead the effort, but I am the one who does
Tip of the spear.
communication stuff, so yes. Awesome, so that brings us to the Portsmouth Climate Action Plan. We have 4 subtopics: plans for 2026, CIP requests, discussion, and then planning and sustainability department role with CAP dashboard. So who is the best person to speak to this?
The plans for 2026, just I think revolve around the spreadsheet and table that you and Effie did and keeping that updated and current, I think.
Yep, and I think it, part of this discussion is, and we talked about this a bit at last meeting, kind of keeping on top of all those CIP requests that we made, that the committee accepted, and how that's moving forward and what's happening and what our plan is for this year. Because last year when we started putting those requests together, we started working on it in March, figuring out what our priorities were and the verbiage and what we were gonna do around that. So I think that was the sort of, and also within this, are there other things that people are interested in working on? The CIP requests are pretty specific tasks, but the climate action plan is pretty broad. So I know Colleen has worked a lot on like trying to create a way to reach out to stakeholders in the broader city, businesses and things. And so is there any motivation from committee members to really kind of actively take that on? I think Kristen's always looking for help to gain awareness about some of the health department's efforts around, trying to encourage Skip the Stuff and restaurants to participate in that. So are there other initiatives that the committee wants to work on this year besides just focusing on the budget and CIP requests?
So it's CIP.
Capital Improvement Plan, yeah, so it's the precursor to the city budget. So and Annie and Kate and others can probably speak to this better than I can, but we had 4 requests that we asked them to put in. It won't necessarily go into this year's budget, but like, please allocate this money to do this in the future. One of them was around microtransit study and looking at how that could work in our city and what that would operate. And then we had one around city properties and potential for solar. And so it's kind of trying to encourage the city in future budgets to put aside money for some sustainable projects or thinking.
And it's a capital budget, meaning it's infrastructure, roads, utilities, vehicles, boats, but it also includes plants. So I think, and data collection, and I think our projects were more on the planning side to get ready for future, maybe more capital infrastructure activities. On your summary, Jess, I think that the types of things that we've discussed as priorities are the climate action plan, proposals for the capital budget, and there's, sort of like overlapping. There are things that are in the climate action plan that wouldn't go into the CIP, educational sorts of things. And then there are other things that are sustainability related that are not necessarily directly falling right out of the capital budget, like or the climate action plan. So there's sort of a hierarchy of activities, and I think one of the challenges for the committee is we're really, how do we want to prioritize going into the next year? Tracking the 4 projects that the committee succeeded in getting into the CIP, I think is a priority. Coming up with another set for the next CIP, because it's updated every year, is a second priority. So it's implement the plan, ideas for the CIP, and other topics. And that covers an awful lot of ground. But I think productive year, probably the sooner we come up with a sharp focus for how we want to spend our time, the better.
I wanted to add on just to the list, the event management project, and then also, Jess, you mentioned this, but further stakeholder engagement. The event management project is right now very much in a research phase. So if anyone wants to help me with that, I'd be happy to take it out of my brain and share it with folks. Again, right now it's very much my baby, but Kristen has been really helpful in giving ideas and feedback, and Rianne has also been helpful in that. So it would be great if it was like a committee thing and not just a Colleen thing, but I also know that people are doing stuff. And then in terms of stakeholder engagement, I think for committee maturity, getting stronger relationships with other committees and city departments, not just the council, would be valuable this year. Understanding what they're talking about, especially as we see, if we want future CIP requests, are there points of collaboration or things other people are going to request that we can support? Just continuing to firm up those in-government associations. And then in the future, we can look towards things like relationships with the businesses or nonprofit spheres, with residents. But for 2026, keeping it focused within the city government.
Yes, sir.
Colleen, event project management. And what was just said, where's our highest leverage? And I'm trying to think since we're talking about priorities.
Yes.
And you just entered a new one into my mind. Would it be, and I've never thought about this, and I'm not suggesting, I want to know if this is what you're thinking, and I'm thinking, if we spent and I'm not suggesting we do this, a whole year just learning how to connect with other committees and put our energies into having representative on all the other committees, bringing it back here, and we became a hub to collect what other committees are actually doing. And then interject sustainability activities in departments and so forth. Would that be the most effective use of our time? Or
So my understanding just from feedback I've gotten from different committee members is that adding sustainability committee members to other committees is too significant a time drain. And some people are already on multiple committees, but watching the videos and having not necessarily being on the committee, but having relationships with people on committees is valuable and gets us a lot of the same stuff. And the same benefits without somebody having to be there every single month. I think that the question around what are we doing this year, I was focusing on that in government piece because it's the easiest to track and I think the lowest hanging fruit. And we had originally applied for like a UNH team to help with this, but I don't think we got it, of having some sort of like communications audit, communications breakdown of who are our stakeholders, how are we communicating with them, with the cap, with Skip the Stuff, all these things. That's kind of been a reoccurring gap, but it is too big a project, I think, for us to just totally embrace, which was why I was trying to break it down more into like just other committees or just focusing on the event management piece.
Couple of thoughts. Let's say Jim here is a very good example because he's on the digital communications.
It's called the Cable and Broadband Commission. Yeah.
And it involves digital communications.
Well, I hope it involves more than it does currently.
But in any case, that's an example of a potential liaison between this committee. Next month, we're having Rick Chelman come to speak. That's the beginnings of a relationship with the planning group. Annie, I think you're on the traffic and parking committee as well.
Yeah, and I was gonna offer up, I mean, every city councilor has to be on a minimum of 2 committees.
Yeah.
And would it be valuable for me to reach out to those folks who this committee is interested in collaborating with and say, hey, can we just do a monthly like email recap summary? Because I feel like this city council is really very friendly, very collaborative. So I would feel comfortable saying like, hey, here's some sustainability ideas that we're sharing. Can we I could be
As they evolve, like say particularly, we don't call it the micro transit project anymore that's in the CIP. It's the expand public transit project in the CIP, and as part of the council's vote on that, it's to establish a task force that would have common membership. But all those things evolve, but it's almost like you need some substance to be communicating and liaisons and contact. So I would say that the communications and the liaisons and the list of the stakeholders should really be considered a means to an end, but the end should be sustainability types of outcomes. And we've always said for currently, the implementation of the cap is a top priority. So for example, reduction of greenhouse gas or emissions, meeting the city's zero emissions targets. I mean, if there's an opportunity to connect with another committee to accomplish that outcome, then that's where we should really be concentrating on the communications strategy and the stakeholder connections.
Just bringing it back to like this topic being what are our priorities for 2026? My opinion is that if communication or stakeholder engagement isn't in some capacity a priority, because right now it's so organic that it's really happening on like a person-to-person basis. If we want to have that grow at all, there needs to be like a focused effort. We have to say like, this is something that is a priority is deserving of our time and resources. We might, as a committee, say no. Like this can be a Colleen side hustle, that's fine. But if we want to have strong relationships so that we know when another committee is gonna try and build a new parking garage, or we know when the council is doing something that would really like benefit from our perspective, and we want to build all of that in, that is something that doesn't just happen automatically. And I think would require like a firm, yes, this is something we're willing to dedicate committee time and resources to.
But the number of connections is kind of infinite and the time
Yes.
limited.
And-
So I think there's a real,
Yes, and that is where
There's a-
I can have Kate resend it. I had a specific like mini project proposal from a few months ago that tried to put specific parameters around it and make it clear like this is what that engagement would look like. These are the mechanisms by which we would be engaging with different committees. I'm happy to recirculate that. But I think that's part of the question. Like, what does effective communication look like for our committee? There was a point where that was giving input on the climate action plan, which was a really big function of this committee. But when that ended, where are we ending up now? We've had good successes. We had the coast person come. We've had the budget proposals. Like there have been points that have been really great. Why were they great? How can we replicate that to other things right now? And maybe it's just because I'm me and sometimes I need things like clearly spelled out with an infographic. I don't know where that communication is happening or with who or why. And it doesn't seem to be aligned to a strategy. Yeah.
what I would suggest is by setting our priorities, that could then guide where the opportunities are for connecting to other communities. You know,
I'll email you. I think I'm like talking past your point, which could just be because I'm on day 2 of a conference, so maybe I'm not quite like connecting with it. But yeah, no, I see what you mean about like our goal should be the sustainability priorities. This is a means to an end. Yeah.
Okay, so few things. I think we danced away from the CIP request. I want to come back to that. I think is there agreement that we want to make requests?
Mhm.
Okay, so I think that's step one.
make requests and follow up on the requests that are hopefully in the CIP as it goes forward, the current
Okay.
requests.
So then I would also venture to say that we want our request to tie back to the cap.
Mhm.
Okay, and so could someone refresh on what we had requested and gotten buy-in on last year or cycle? Cause I'm wondering if we had previously requested like studies and like feasibility studies, if it makes sense to keep like building off of those rather than just like doing a bunch of studies. So could anyone quickly refresh on what the 4 were?
We had a carbon assessment. So renew the carbon inventory. We had investigating electrifying the city fleet of vehicles. We had the microtransit study.
Not microtransit, expand public transit.
And then the 4th one was
Solar.
Yeah, was that to put a solar panel where we could.
well, that was
Yeah.
already funded, though, wasn't it?
City property inventory for solar
And they'd already done it, but that's the one I.
and electrification of the city fleet.
You already mentioned that.
Yeah, and I think that the Public Works said they were already doing that one, I think. So it's on the.
Yeah, there's 50 grand for fiscal year 27 set aside for hiring a contractor to start to develop a fleet electrification plan for phasing out over the next couple of years.
And on the public transit one, they had asked the committee to come up with recommendations for that, which Councilors Denton and with Councilor Kate Cook presented to the council. And they, in the recommendations, which maybe we should circulate again, the recommendations to the committee was the basis for the discussion. And that included renaming the project because it was confusing, because it was micro transit, and then in the description of it, it was much broader. It included a shuttle loop or expansion of current service or a hybrid, and also to move the funding up from I think 2029 to 2027, which is the initial current year of the CIP. And there's a lot of discussion about that. It was late in the evening, and they came up with a compromise where they were going to move that project, as I remember it, and this is December 8th, with current 100,000 of current funding into alongside but separate from $3 million for a parking study. I think that was the city manager had suggested that as a compromise. And then I haven't seen anything more final or formal since December 8th. So we talked about this at the last meeting. So I don't think there's anything posted online with the CIP, with the new name and the shift of budgeting. Councilor Denton was very clear that this should be considered as a separate activity, a separate project, and not a subcomponent of a parking study, and that the recommendations from this committee should be included, I think, or referenced in the CIP. And that was December 8th. Do you, Kate or Annie, do you know if there's another revised version of the CIP? Because I haven't seen one.
Coming out shortly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it hasn't been
I
published
just
yet.
looked on the website there. I think, yeah, the plan is to publish it shortly.
So I think that's the one of the four that's sort of up in the air a bit. I think the other three are pretty clear.
In addition to those four that we did last year, there were other funding that was done previous years.
Including this project that was on, and it was presented as pursue state and federal funds. And since then, been pretty clear there are no state and federal funds. And rather than waiting till 2029, and 30 councilors Denton and Cook said, let's move ahead.
Yeah, and there's also previous capital requests for EV charging, which I think was a multi-year thing. So there was some money spent last year on that. So that's something we don't should know, the things we should pay attention to and track what's going on with that this year. And then there's also, of course, the bike ped plan that's been funded to some extent, and that's something
Which is in the cap and which we've supported.
Yeah, we should continue to monitor that and make sure that there's, meeting deadlines and all that.
I think that in key to what you said, Fred, is track and support. So I think the key for this committee is stay on top of it and work with others to accomplish these things, move forward.
Yeah, and for example, then regarding solar, there's already a study ongoing right now for the Jones Avenue landfill cap. So that's going to come out in a month or two, and we can. CIP. When that comes out, we can, we could see what the outcome of that is and make sure that they're taking action on that or whatever, just stay on top of it.
Okay, great. So track and support, I think, is an agreed upon message right now. Otherwise, maybe we ask everyone to go offline between now and the next meeting and come back with specific CIP proposals of personal interest.
I think what we talked about is keeping current the Jess and Effie's table.
Okay.
And providing input into that. I don't know how much input there is to add on that, but maybe, Kate, if we could send that out a week before and just ask folks, because we can't have a shared live document, to just send you input for that. Maybe if you sent it out the week before, and committee members could send in input for you to add to that and circulate before the meeting. That'll at least help us move forward rather than.
And the other thing to do is to look at the cap itself and say, are there things in the cap that we should start thinking about? When are those gonna start getting implemented?
Yeah, and all of these things are not one and done. They're
Right,
all
right.
sort of incremental,
That
continuous.
was with many things having a 15-year timeframe,
Yeah.
so we're gonna be talking about this until many of us are very old.
And I would just remind everybody, you know, the inception of that cap table was based on trying to get feedback from what people were interested in working on to help encourage that those pieces would continue to be developed and thought about and followed and pursued, because you're right, there's, you know, a bunch of strategies in the cap, but what is gonna motivate volunteer committee members to spend their time kind of working on
Right,
and
right.
delving into, so
And that's a really good way to focus priorities going forward, including on Colleen's communication outreach, because let's say those 4 or the next cycle of additional CIP proposals could all be ones that lend themselves to communications and liaison.
Okay, the last bullet, planning and sustainability department role with cap dashboard. Do you know what that means?
No, I don't.
Does anyone know what that means as it pertains to this?
Is cap dashboard, is that right action?
That's what I'm thinking.
No, that's the Power BI one.
Yeah,
I don't know
I think.
if he added this or someone.
Were you going to look at examples from other
Yeah, so I have
apps?
started making different graphics to kind of scrap the screenshots of the dashboard until we get that figured out. But I think we're gonna work on them internally a little bit before we bring different options to the committee, just to make sure that the city manager and the legal department are okay with us displaying different graphics and kind of showcasing our progress online.
It may be one of those things where it's less about showing progress and more about communicating,
I think so.
you know, really getting it down to something graphic, because it's a very long and very detailed cap, and a picture's worth 1,000 words. So it may be more of that than really putting the city out to say, well, we only did 1% of this. and
Right,
1%
that's
of
kind
that.
of
Oh, the hand.
fear. Yeah.
And
And Peter and I were talking about kind of trying to divvy it up, so there's 6 different graphics, one for each pathway, because each pathway has like between 5 and like 12 strategies. So just trying to kind of pull out community strategies versus municipal strategies and highlight maybe what's ongoing, what we're working on, educating people on, things like that. But that, even that alone, there's like 52 or 53 strategies. So that might get too wordy, and we might just have to revert back to one simple visual saying, these are all the pathways, and highlighting which ones are being worked on in the year, blah, blah, blah. But we're still kind of workshopping that.
so even some examples from the other
Yeah, even we can even just have like a,
caps would be really interesting to see, and really how they accomplish the communications without getting too detailed.
I think, yeah, some visuals, and then having a, 2026 update or 2025 update. We can put in some sections for the last few years. In 2025, we started working on this strategy, this strategy, this strategy. 2026, we're looking at CIP items, hoping to tackle more climate action plan strategies come September 2026.
It sounds like some
Yeah.
good progress on that.
Updates, yeah.
Sure, good.
I mean, it's not very likely that you're going to be able to reduce it down to metric tons of CO2. But
No,
just to be able to say, here are the 6 themes and here are some things we're working on.
Yeah, and even when you go through all the strategies, it's kind of surprising how many we're working on already, or not fully, but at least some projects directly tie into a lot of the strategies, like the bike ped implementation, the Jones Ave solar landfill.
Yep. School buses.
Yes, the school bus fleet, yeah, electrifying the city fleet, things like that, and the climate smart land use stuff, so calculating open space and trying to do that. We have intern starting next week who's gonna help me with and Kristen's gonna help with us too, a heat resilience project, so that'll hit on the resilience pathway. Cause there's, heat resilience, energy resilience, infrastructure, and flood resilience in that pathway, all those different strategies. So we're trying to tackle heat resilience this year and put together a report. So we're trying to keep track. But
Even to have it show there are 5 mitigation pathways and 1 resilience is
yeah,
very
it was
good
kind
just to get out that it's both.
that there's all these different subjects that we're trying to be really diverse about tackling. Yeah. So in progress is the update for that.
Alright, awesome. So it is 8 o'clock. We'll do our best to get through as much as we can in the next 30 minutes, but I'm gonna jump to the Portsmouth Master Plan if there's no more final comments on the climate action plan. Okay, I'll turn it over to you, Jess.
Okay, so I mean, I think if you all recall, I shared with you just a summary of the last steering committee for the new master plan. For all of you who haven't been here before, I am one of the members of that advisory committee as we work on our new master plan. And so if you remember, they had presented a vision statement to us, some core values, some goals, really just some broad themes and topics that they are thinking about as they start to develop this draft. Their intention is to have a draft that they can present in April to the public to start to get feedback from the community more broadly. We have not met again. We meet in a couple weeks in the middle of February to kind of just see where they're at after the initial feedback they got from us and what they presented. But I had wanted to share that information with this committee if there were priorities for this committee or things that you saw from those broad topics and ideas that you wanted me to pass on to the consultants as they get ready to work on that draft and next phase. So I don't know if any of you have had a chance to look at it again. I don't know if you have any thoughts. I mean, they do talk about resiliency. At one point there was discussion about sustainability being sort of its own core value. And this committee had talked about whether that was a priority or just understanding that it was thread throughout the master plan and did it need to be its own core value? So I don't know if any members have thoughts.
Is there support and understanding for sustainability to be thread through
I
that,
believe.
or is that a debate?
No, I believe so. The consultant has consistently given us a message that they recognize the city has done a ton of work already and we have a lot of plans in place, including our climate action plan. And so they see their role a bit as trying to fill holes where they see it. And they also see their efforts focused on sort of small areas of the city where future development is likely to happen, and how can our master plan help to guide what that development looks like.
I liked the connectivity. Was that a theme or a cross-cutting?
That was a core value.
A core value, because I think that touches on the land development, the neighborhoods, and of course, the transportation considerations. So I was very happy to see that as a core value. I mean, sort of like big picture connectivity. It's physical connectivity for transportation, but it's also connecting neighborhoods and connecting people. So I think that's a really good one. And I think I would hope the master plan would do more than just fill in gaps, and that it would complement the other plans, incorporate them, bring them up to a higher level, like the bike pedestrian plan or the climate action plan, that it would be really nicely packaged together and cross-referenced very organically and frequently.
Can I be selfish for a moment?
Sure.
Okay. I think this might get a chance for a little cross-committee collaboration. And thank you, Bill, for mentioning connectivity. All right, in that regard. My question is I went to the vision thing at the library and asked the question, is the digital future for Portsmouth in the master plan. Of course, it's not. I've read the master plan. And I said, so should we be planning for the digital future for Portsmouth in the same way we plan for roads and sewers and electricity and that sort of thing? So my block and tackling question is that, overarching sort of subject, something that can be added to the vision statements going forward? And if so, how can I, help pursue that? The thing that I've been doing is, this is about connectivity in the digital realm. All right, so there's the Cable and Broadband Commission. So the cable part was stood up as a result of RSA 53-C, which was cable franchising. So we've been getting money from Comcast for, public access to the cable and all that sort of stuff. The committee itself has kind of, expanded its interest to broadband as well, but there's no official remit as such for that, as best I know. So I've been kind of diving down all these rabbit holes as to how to move the subject forward. And it turns out the state of New Hampshire has been very helpful. Is that there is an RSA 53G2. So same one, or actually RSA 53G. So we were going from C to G here. Yay. So the title of this RSA is Communications Districts. And what the state has decided to do is give cities and municipalities, but in particular regions, the opportunity to create communications districts. So stand up infrastructure for internet infrastructure and stand up, services for internet services, that sort of thing. And we can actually create a district like a water district, but it's about communications. So we can be the conduit for federal funding. We can go do bonds for creating digital infrastructure. So if we want to have our own passive optical networks in the region for New Hampshire, this would be the opportunity to stand that sort of thing up and make it work. All right. So we're very fortunate in the fact that we have unbelievable resources in the area that can help us do this sort of thing. And so my mission to get involved is to, try and wrestle all this stuff together and make it evident to people who would like to take advantage of the opportunity. All right. So if I could take just a moment, I wanted to kind of tell you what the powers of this thing could be. And
Jim, can I just, ask
Sure.
you one clarifying
Yeah, of course.
question? Those communication districts that the state has created, are they town-based or regionally based or county-based, or how did they
The
define?
answer to that is yes.
Okay.
And so what it is, the kind of the parameters of it is you can stand up a district in a county, or you can stand up a district between two communities. So if Portsmouth and Newington, for example, decided to collaborate on doing something, we could stand up a communications district, right?
Okay.
Me being me, I think a collaboration between Stratford County and Rockingham County would be a great thing. I don't think the county is going to do it at that level, so I think it's going to be up to the municipalities to form the commission and then get more municipalities to join us. We start fleshing that out. But we have spectacular resources, and I'd love to describe what they are and at a future date, and please invite me back so I can pitch to you why communications is a sustainability activity, all right, and adds to your mission. But in any case, yeah, so the goal here would be to put Portsmouth and the region into the world-class category for digital infrastructure and make it as sustainable as we consider roads and sewage and electricity to be. Thanks for the pitch.
I would just add that the Federal Reserve Bank right now has this, at the federal level, has this Making Missing Markets initiative, which does actually address, they're really trying to get behind the broadband in communities where it's missing. And the integration of that in helping communities build in a way that is sustainable. So what you're talking about here on a micro level, the Fed is already looking at a macro level.
Yeah,
It was at their making missing markets.
There would be
initiative in
a
fall.
great source for funding. The other thing I'd like to do is I'd like this to
Actually,
be,
funding, that's great, yeah.
yep,
Go ahead.
the treasury, yeah, the
They're putting
treasury
dollars
has
there
money.
right now. Okay.
So, yeah. Comcast, I don't think, is a primary service for the area and for computing networking infrastructure. DOCSIS, which is the technical underpinning of the Comcast networks, is arriving at its technical obsolescence and needs to be replaced. Thank you.
You're welcome to join. Share meetings, right? Yeah. So please come back. So did you get noted down what you needed to, Jess? Great, awesome. Any other feedback for Jess before she attends the next master plan meeting? Yes, Bert.
We did mention, I think, last week's about this next 10 years is not business as usual. And I think that language will get in. That the window of opportunity is now with some urgency. And I was just trying to look up, Drawdown has 3 plans for the future. One's to do immediately, which will give us the biggest bang for the buck, midterm and long term. And so I was trying to find that. I didn't find it, but it's a good way of thinking. So to do the methane gas capping now and is much more important than try to do something to take carbon out of the atmosphere. So there might be something similar in the city. There are some things that are going to be important now in terms of tidal rise. And so I don't know if they're breaking it up in that kind of immediate. Are they?
I think so. So, like I said, I had anticipated we would see something a little more detailed, and what we just got were broad strokes of sort of the themes and the goals and the broader view. But my hope is that what they are now doing is putting together strategies and more detailed information about what they see and from the feedback that they've gotten from the community members so far about what our master plan should look like for the next 10 years. And I would say that to any of you who are new and who have not engaged, that was one of the big take homes for me, was that about 2.5% of Portsmouth population has participated or gone and looked at the boards or anything, which is like 500 to 600 of us, and 84% of those were retired. So families and all those people who, have real invested interest in what happens to our city. Not that retirees don't, no offense, but we have not gotten them to engage in this topic yet. So I would say spread the word to anybody to try to get more feedback.
I haven't taken a look and I'm happy to, but I'm curious that they're addressing the waste management and kind of thoughts on that being addressed in the master plan.
Again, what we just saw were very broad strokes, and the master plan, my understanding historically is that this is a document that the planning board uses a lot as far as what they approve to happen in the city in regards to development and other projects and those kinds of things. So I don't know how much they are going to drill down into some of those pieces, but hopefully once we get more of a draft.
Rick Shulman coming
Next month.
What sorts of things do you think we should be thinking about, talking to him about in the timing, let's say, of the master plan?
I mean, I think all of the points that you've already made, that I think, to your point, that time is of the essence and we can't really be doing business as usual, and that what are we really gonna do as a city to kind of address.
That'd be good for our committee. You could say the sustainability. That would be another tool that would say that helps us focus our priorities.
Yeah. I think, I believe it's February 18th.
Okay, any more thoughts, questions, concerns, feelings on the Portsmouth master plan? Okay, so I think we have time for one more topic. So let's decide what the highest priority is between Energy Advisory Committee update, future meeting topics, trees task force, and then Colleen's.
You can skip me. Just, it's an open invitation to anyone who wants to work on that stuff with me, but you can skip me tonight.
I think we'll call that the update. Okay,
Excuse me, Colleen, did you want to be on the next agenda to go to more?
Yeah,
Detail
that would be
or-
great. Yeah, and I can give a report out then. Thank you.
you got that? Okay, trees or energy?
A very brief energy update. The main topic we talked about at the last meeting was the fact that New Hampshire Community Power rates are higher than Eversource. The initial attraction for community power is that it was going to be cheaper than utilities. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. There's two things going on. One is that as a result of the competition from community power, the utilities have lowered their rates. So it was effective in that sense is that it did have achieve the desired objective. However, because of the way they structured community power, they ran into some debt, and a lot of the current rate structure is based on paying down that debt. So for the next year and a half or so, the rate will include some of that debt payment. After that time, the rates will drop back down to where they're more competitive with the utilities. But anybody who lives in Portsmouth is probably already aware that the community power rates are currently higher than Eversource, and there's very good explanations for why that's true. And hopefully, if you don't have that, let me know and I can get that to you. But that was the basic topic of the meeting.
Any questions for Fred? Okay. Do we think we can give a trees task force update in?
I can.
5
It's a
minutes or
work in
less?
progress. So I have reached out to Trees and Greenery Committee, one of their members, about connecting and meeting and figuring out a time to discuss things with Max. And since we had also talked about engaging Conservation Commission, but since I sit on both of those, I can kind of play that dual, or both Sustainability Committee and Conservation Commission, I can kind of play that dual with. So it's just figuring out a time for where we can all sit down and have a conversation and figure out next steps.
Okay, any other topics that take less than 5 minutes? Otherwise, we're gonna adjourn. Okay. We need to make a motion to adjourn.
Oh, wait, can we just go back to content topics? I think
Yes.
that's just on there as just kind of keep committee members thinking. Because we had a really good presentation from STA and the woman about the electric buses, and, Rick's gonna come next month to talk about planning board and
New
some
Hampshire
things.
CAP.
Yep, the New Hampshire CAP was another really good one, so if there are topics that come up for members or guests that you'd be interested in just learning more about, just to kind of put that out there so we can work on.
Can I make some requests?
Yep.
I'd love to get Craig Welch from the PHA to come in. He did a presentation for the housing committee on the Sherburne School housing project as well as the Christchurch housing project, and I think it would be cool to hear about those, see if there are any points that we can provide support on, feedback on. I don't know how to reach him, what his schedule is, but I think that would be an interesting guest speaker.
That's a great idea, and I think particularly that the land use and housing topic is one we've touched on only really briefly, and I think having a speaker like that come and maybe reflect a bit of a sustainability perspective, I think would be a really good future topic, and I'm sure that he would be happy to come.
Awesome. Cool. And then also just keeping on our radar, the new Franklin school renovations as those progress. I don't know who will be like, is that like, oh, we should keep talking to the school board or if it's a particular department. And then also the planning board had discussions around the lad lot parking being re-added to inventory and potential for a parking garage design for that location. And just, we've been talking a lot about the future of transit in Portsmouth. So if they're considering that, if we can get, I don't know, a presentation on what their thoughts are and what exactly they want out of it and kind of see where it fits into our vision as well.
Those are three great topics.
Thank you.
Bill, do you know the first individual? I didn't catch the name.
Yeah, a bit enough to check with him, but that may be something, I mean, I think these three topics and some of the other ones are ones we can consider scheduling over through the next year and really, maybe every other month or so, depending on our schedule, it would be a nice way of enriching our thinking and connecting to other city priorities, and also an opportunity to add a sustainability overlay that may not occur naturally to Portsmouth Housing Authority or, with the parking question, I think having Annie involved in that traffic and parking committee, I think is going to be really a good connection.
Which lot was that? I missed the lot.
It's $3 million.
Oh, the lad lot. Got it.
$3 million to study a new garage.
Yeah. Study a garage.
Need to make a motion to adjourn.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Okay, great. Meeting adjourned.
Well facilitated.
Thanks.
Yeah, great job.
Thanks. Okay, so if I can keep you here for 5 more minutes, we'll just do a checkout question and then